A couple of years back, I had the car fully packed. Family was already in the car. I was my son missing. So I went back in the house, looking for my son. And in the corner was Bo, and he was crying. He was crying with the Nintendo DS in his hand. And shit, the Nintendo DS at that moment was the love of his life. And I can tell you I was pretty happy with it too, because it would keep him busy while we were going on holiday. So you can imagine this was kind of a stressful moment for the both of us. But luckily, I'm an engineer. So I told Bo, listen, don't worry, Daddy will fix it. So I took my screwdriver. I have a special electronic screwdriver set. And I started screwing and screwing and screwing. And at a certain point, the metal dust came falling out of the screw holes. I don't know if there's engineers amongst you here, but if the metal dust comes falling out of the screw holes, you screwed up the screws. And if you screw up the screws, well, you're screwed, because there's no way to be able to open up the device anymore. I had to find out the hard way that Nintendo does not want me to open up their device. They use special tri-wing kind of screwdrivers, which did not match with my screwdriver set. So I got really pissed, took the Nintendo, threw it against the wall. Bo was crying in the corner. The whole family was pretty upset with me at that moment. But what I did, I sat on the couch, contemplated about why does Nintendo not want me to open up a device that I own? And my motto in life is, if you can't open it, you don't own it. And I can tell you, life sucks nowadays if you look at how products are made and you like to make, to open up stuff. Just have a look at one of the devices we all own. Is there anyone here, just for my information, anyone here who recently replaced the battery of the smartphone? Oh wow, somebody laughing already? How was how was that experience? Oh, it was okay. Okay, you're an engineer probably, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Any non-engineers that opened up their phone recently? How was that experience? Was so? You had a tutorial to follow? Yeah, okay, great. Online tutorial. Well, I can tell you it gets more and more difficult to replace a battery. And let's not even talk about replacing a screen or repairing something, another part of your phone. And the reason for that is something I would like to call, we're suffering from smartphone anorexia. Because we like really thin devices. And the thinner they get, the more problematic it becomes to repair them. Why? Because the battery gets glued to the inside to make space for all that thinness for the phone. The screen is stacked, and so all that technology has to fit into that really tiny device that we like to have. And the result of that is that we use smartphones on an average of 2 to 3 years. And that's a real shame, because it can be much longer. But you know the feeling. You have a smartphone, you've had it already for 2 years, the battery goes down, you have a crack in your screen, it's super expensive to replace it, it's difficult to replace it yourself, and then the operator comes with a new subscription and a new smartphone, and they say, they offer that at a discount. You take that smartphone, toss the old smartphone with the rest of the old smartphones in the drawer. Is there anyone here who has that drawer? Okay. People have a drawer with old smartphones. And only 15% of the smartphones in that drawer eventually get recycled, because we believe we still need it for another time or whatever. But that's a huge waste. There are more phones than people on this planet. Electronic waste, not just phones, is the fastest growing waste stream that we have currently in the planet. And the solution is super simple. If you use your device, your phone, or your electronic device longer, it's better. Let's do a very simple calculation. If you use the phone twice as long, you only need to produce half the amount of phones, and you have half the amount of electronic waste. Simple. And for the mathematicians amongst us, it only costs you half the money. So, in a way, it's really kind of stupid that we don't hold on to these devices longer. So that's why we at Fairphone, we made a phone that is easy to repair. It's a consumably repairable phone. You can just pop out the battery, take it out. The whole phone is designed in a modular way, so you can you can take it apart like Lego. And if something breaks with a screwdriver, you just order a new part online, take the old phone, take the old part out of it, put the new screen in, and off you go. We give 5 years warranty on the phone, and we support for up to 8 years of software on these phones. And why? Because we want you to use the phone as long as possible. And like I said, that's great for your wallet, but it's great for the environment as well. If you use the phone twice as long, or any other electronic device, I do think, you reduce the carbon footprint of that device by 30%. And that's a huge win. Because most of the harm, when you have your device in your hand, has already been done. So you ask yourself then, why isn't everybody making modular devices, easy repairable devices? Well, I wish. The electronics industry pushes batteries, screens, components, software into the market like clockwork. It's a very short-term industry. And we, as Fairphone, trying to navigate in that short-term industry longevity, a long-term vision. So that is difficult. We already knew from the start that the challenge is not just designing a phone that we can use longer in a way that is modular, but also that we have to fight that challenge on the industry level. So that's why back in 2013, when we started Fairphone, just recently, I think we were on the way for 2 years, I sent a letter to Frans Timmermans. Frans Timmermans at the time was the Euro Commissioner getting ready for a design directive called the Eco-Design Directive. The Eco-Design Directive is a directive where all electronics, or not all, where electronics producers in Europe should support consumers with spare parts and repair manuals. So it should be easier to repair their products. But they didn't want to exclude smartphones in there, because it would be too difficult for the industry to actually do that. So I wrote them a letter, please put smartphones in there as well. And to my surprise, I got a letter back. And they said, well, we'll take it into consideration. And then I heard nothing again. I mean, it's the EU, right? So for a long time, I didn't hear anything. Until last year, I read this. All smartphones, including iPhones, must have replaceable batteries by 2027 in the EU. And I'm not saying it was because I wrote that letter only. There was a whole lobby around it, Rise to Repair, and all kinds of movements, and also consumer movements that stood up like, we don't want this anymore. And because of that, now we have this legislation. And what put really a smile on my face is when I read this. Nokia is taking Fairphone head-on repairability. And why that put a big smile on my face is first, I knew Nokia is doing that because they have to do that eventually. But secondly, this was the plan we had from the start. Fairphone's theory of change is raise awareness around the problem, set an example, show that it can be done differently by repairable devices or other things, and motivate the industry either through legislation or partnerships or all kinds of ways that we can work together to also implement these changes. So if we look back how Fairphone started, campaigning is in our DNA. Back in 2011, I was thinking about setting up a campaign with a group of people to raise awareness on the impact, the social and environmental impact of electronics, specifically smartphones. And we were thinking about it, and the more we thought about it, the more difficult it got. Because where do you start? I don't think I have to tell you that a phone is not a banana. It's a very complex product. There's more than 1,000 components in a phone, And these components are made in hundreds and hundreds of factories. And these hundreds and hundreds of factories, they also use all kinds of materials from all over the world. There's more than 60 minerals going into a phone. So you're talking about the whole world here. So where do you start? And also, we didn't have the solution. And if you set up a campaign, it's always good to have a bad guy. And even that we didn't have. So we said, well, let's look at how we do things. At that moment, I was still a designer, an artist, a creative. And one of the things I was always fascinated by is that everything we use either grows on the ground or comes from the ground. Just think about it. I mean, there's quite some people probably that have the phone in their hands now. Just think about it, that product starts somewhere in a mine where people take stuff out of the ground, and we are able, by working together through our economic system, to make something as complex as a phone through that economic system. By working together, we can make something that we would never be able to make as an individual through that same system. And that's magical. But as with technology, as with complex products, we've also alienated from that same system. Who made it? Where does it come from? Where does it end up if we don't use it anymore? And that's when we took a very naive step. We said, okay, if everything's come from the ground, why don't we set up a company called Fairphone, and we start in a mine somewhere, and we're going to make our own phone, and we're going to look at the world through the eyes of a phone, and we're going to surface the problems, and if we bump into something, we see if we can collaboratively improve the conditions that we bump into. So we call the company Fairphone, and we want to see if we can get the whole industry to join us. So, before I go into that, I'd like to show you what the world actually looks like through the eyes of a phone. So this is a stone I'm holding. It's called cobalt. I took that from a mine in Congo. Anyone here who knows what cobalt is being used for? Like primarily at the moment? Batteries, yeah. So batteries. Cobalt is, for the electronics industry, one of the key minerals. One of the key minerals also for our energy transition, because we use it in batteries. If we drive a Tesla, cobalt. I came here on my Van Moof, cobalt. So this mineral is being used for our sustainability transition. And this mineral, this specific stone, I got from a mine. I took a picture from the mine where I got it from. And this guy is digging like 30, 60 meters deep into the ground to get these minerals out of the ground so that we can drive our Tesla. And there's not so much protection to do this, risking their own life. And I can tell you there's more than 250,000 people working in Congolese mines at the moment to get these minerals out of the ground. Most of the world's supply of cobalt is in Congo. And there's more going on. Tens and tens of thousands of children are still working in these mines to get this stuff out of the ground so that we have our electronic devices. And this is not just a problem from an ethical point of view, but also from a business point of view. Let me show you how that worked out for some of the big tech companies.
The world's biggest tech companies are being sued over child mining deaths in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A human rights group filed a lawsuit on behalf of 14 Congolese families. They accuse companies like Apple, Google, Dell, Microsoft, and Tesla from benefiting from child labor to mine cobalt. That mineral is key to powering batteries used in our cell phones, computers, and our electric cars.
CBS News launched an investigation into child cobalt miners in Congo last year. And foreign correspondent Deborah Pata exposed the horrific conditions, and now she's taking a closer look at this unprecedented lawsuit.
So on top of that, in the last 10, 15 years, millions of people have died in conflicts related to mining of these minerals, very similar to blood diamonds. And then these minerals, they end up in factories, huge factories where people work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week to put these components together for a minimum wage of which they have to make these terrible overtime to be able to survive. And when we use, and then we use these phones, and then once we get rid of them, some of these phones that don't end up in the drawers, they go to countries like Ghana. And this is some pictures I took a couple of months ago when I did a research trip on electronic waste in Ghana. And they end up in dumps like this. Most of our electronics devices end up here for a second life, where they cannot properly recycle them. If your battery is glued to the phone, what you do is you burn it if you don't have the machines to get the minerals out of it. And then you go to a conference like Mobile World Congress. I don't know if some people might have been there. And then you see a lot of colors, but one of the colors that you will not see a lot is green. And then you think by yourself, how the hell am I going to make a change in such a big industry with all these problems? And that brings me to a quote that helps me. If you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito in the room. And we, as Fairphone, were determined, even after we saw this stuff happening in the supply chain, to be that mosquito for the electronics industry. So what I did, I took one of the stones I just showed you, I took that to KPN. KPN is a Dutch operator here, everybody probably knows them, and I was able to get to speak to them at the board level. I put the stone on the table, and I told the guys, listen, this is going to be a Fairphone. And if you are going to buy 1,000 of these devices now, you guys are going to be launching partner. So I was expecting them to look at me and just throw me out of the thing again, but something magical happened. One of the guys stood up and he said, we need to do something about this. He just read a book about Congo, and he heard what I was saying, and he said, we need to do something about this. 2 weeks later, I had this contract in my pocket. KPN just bought 1,000 non-existing phones for a maximum of 450 euros from a non-existing company, from a guy that never made a phone before. But I had a contract of 1,000 phones. I had no idea what I was doing, never made a phone before, never set up a company, but I had a customer. So what do you do when you have a customer? Well, you set up a crowdfunding platform to create more for customers. So that's what we did. People heard about KPN buying 1,000 1,000 existing phones from Fairphone, and they thought, if KPN buys 1,000 phones, then it must be real. So bring it on. We want to have that phone as well. And this is the video that we launched at the time.
Stuff. More stuff. All this stuff. You name it, we have it. But what we don't have, a clue about what's inside this stuff. We don't know where it comes from, or who made it. We know almost nothing about our stuff. That's why we started with an alternative for the thing we can't live without. Our phone. We are the people of Fairphone.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello. Good day.
Hoi.
Guten Tag. Hello.
And this is what we're building. The Fairphone. As smart as other phones, but fair. Which makes it more than a phone. It's a beginning, a step in the right direction. We're making it happen. A smartphone that's made in a way that puts people and the environment first. We're already working hard on the first batch. We're almost there. And that's where you come in. To start making them, we need you to pre-order. Because by buying and owning this phone, you can make a difference. You become part of change. Buy a phone. Start a movement at fairphone.com.
So the next thing we did, we put a button on the website and we said, if you pay 325 euros now, we'll ship the phone in about 6 to 7 months, probably. And this was not a crowdfunding platform, I can tell you. This was an e-shop somewhere where we opened a web shop. All 25,000 phones that we were going to produce, all 25,000 non-existing phones, were being sold out within 2 months. The non-existing phones were being sold on eBay for double the price. We were flying, and like you said, we were flying that plane. we were still building it, and to be honest, I also didn't know how to fly. But it was lifted. We had 7.5 million euros on the bank account. We had no idea what we were doing, but we lifted off. And I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. I was literally in my bed, sobbing, crying, tears in my eyes. And my partner at the time, she looked at me and she said, "Bas, what's going on, man?" I said, "Well, I'm an artist, I'm a designer, I'm an engineer, but I'm not, I have never run a company, and I had to transfer like a couple of millions to a Chinese factory, didn't know what's going to happen, and I said, you know what, I'll just pay back everybody the money. We made a point. People want ethical phones, and that's it. The campaign is a success." And then she looked at me, she said, "You pussy." You will never, ever have a chance like this in your life again. And these people, they didn't buy a phone. They bought into a movement of change. And it's a crowdfunding, so you can take the risk. And I'm happy she told me that, because we took the risk. I transferred that money to the factory in China. And it was, eventually all these phones were delivered within those 6-7 months that I talked about. And after 1.5 years, we had 40 people working at Fairphone. We sold over 60,000 phones. We had 16 million euro turnover. And we were the fastest growing technology startup in Europe at that time. But more importantly, this image popped up 2 years after we started. Greenpeace launched the Guide to Greener Electronics. And according to Greenpeace, this tiny mosquito, probably the smallest electronics company in the world, was the most sustainable electronics company in the world. And that made me super, super proud, because this was far beyond that campaign that we had in mind. And this was what we could do because we were a company in that supply chain. So now, just forwarding to where we are, we've launched, we sold over 500,000 phones. We're a profitable company. We have a turnover around 50 million, and we're at our 5th phone. So if you see the evolution, I mean, there's some in-between models, but the Fairphone 5, we launched it last year. And with every phone that we launch, we do innovations, not on modularity and technology only, but also in the supply chain. We use that phone to keep improving everything that we do, and we use it as a catalyst also for that change. I sleep again because I'm not the CEO anymore. There's actually other people running the company. I'm still in the board and I'm still involved, but it really makes me even more proud when I saw that video of Fairphone 5 launched last year, and I hope you see a bit of the DNA back from the first video I showed you.
The new Fairphone 5 is designed for you, made fair. It's got 3 amazing 50-megapixel cameras to shoot in wide and ultra-wide. It has blazing fast 5G and comes with a 5-year warranty. It's future-proof. It has a special chipset that guarantees software updates for the next 8 years.
Nah, do phones even last that long?
This one does. It's easy to repair because it's modular. You can replace a part yourself in case you break something. It's 100% electronic waste neutral. It's made in fair factories. It's Fairphone's most sustainable phone yet. That's why they say it's designed for you, made fair.
So that's the phone, but more importantly, we do a lot in the supply chain. I won't go into the supply chain too deep. You can download the impact report, what we do, but I just want to show you how we go at it. That whole supply chain is quite complex. And we've divided it up into 4 areas where we can see specific problems, where we can focus on, so we can focus also on specific areas of problem solving. And one of them is fair materials. By now, we actually launched a Fair Cobalt Alliance, of which both Tesla and Google have joined. We are the only ones that actually have fair trade and fair gold certified credits that we use in our supply chain. We use 100% recycled plastics. So we focus on recycling materials, but also on the virgin mining side, because we still need those minerals. On the factories, we're the only ones that have a living wage program, and we're trying to get other companies on board as well to join us in the factories to pay a living wage instead of a minimum wage. We do focus also on recycling, e-waste neutral, as you just heard. We take as many phones back as we put into the market, but to be honest, recycling is just waste management in the electronics industry. Recycling is plainly a stupid process. You collect it, put it on a big pile, you throw it into the incinerator, and you get the minerals out. And that is how we recycle. So in the end, the most important thing is to use the product as long as possible. And as a company, that's where it becomes challenging. And one of the challenges as Fairphone that we put on ourselves is also on the key performance level of the company, that we embrace that dilemma of with everything that we're creating, we're also destroying. We want to sell as many phones as possible and as much revenue as possible on the one hand, but we also have a KPI that says we want people to use the phone as long as possible. And I can tell you that is a bomb in the mind of a salesperson, because a salesperson cannot sell to somebody who has a phone already. And that is where you put human behavior also in the core of your company. So to finish, I'd like to quote someone who has been researching the top environmental problems of our times as a scientist for at least 30, 40 years, Gus Speth. And Gus Speth, he said, I always thought that the biggest environmental problems were the biodiversity loss and global warming. But I found out, and I thought we could solve those through science, but I found the top environmental problems of our time are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And in order to solve those, you can't do that with legislation. You can't do that with science only. You can't do that with innovations only. I truly believe that at the core of the cultural transition that we need for that, we need to reestablish a healthier relationship between us and the products that we use. Because in the end, the most sustainable phone is the phone that you already own. Thank you very much.